it kind of allow for that progression, and this is best explained through spiral. We also find different shapes, like for example lobes and overback jets. For example, if you look at the river just now in the middle, when now the barrier is in place, if you look just at the middle, you're going to see that happening, you know, by the water swirling around and making those little sort of circles, and sort of as the jet is sort of pushing the water forward. But we also find jellyfish, for example, have the same pattern. Mushrooms, classic example. Yes, we find another pattern that is sort of concentric circles. We find in a nature. This is obviously very obvious, sort of when we cut the tree trunk. Also, there is another recognized pattern is branching. So if you look at the tree, it's all about branching. When we look in the medical terms, in our lungs, also is about branching. When we look in the nervous system of any living being, okay, more complex living beings, yeah, there is that branching pattern there. Also in permaculture, when we during the process of design, if we do irrigation system, it's very likely that it will have that branching pattern, breaking sort of water into smaller streams and putting exactly where is needed in order that the landscape get enough water, that our trees and vegetables get enough water in order to grow. Also, I'm going to mention waves and pulses. This is another pattern from nature. Obviously, ocean is very logical, but also we have that sort of wave in a music, a sort of peak, and it's coming up and down. And now, I'm saying this because natural patterns, permaculture is using natural patterns because it's mimicking the natural processes. So this is part of the design that we are going to talk a little bit later on more about that. Okay. Okay. Let's move a little bit forward. What we are saying here. Okay, perfect. There is a tree and there is another tree. It's kind of popping itself. What are the functions of a tree? I'm going to stick with this now, yeah? The tree itself is part of the bigger picture, it's part of the system. It's not tree on its own. Other living beings involved in a process of, let's say, fertilizing the flower, so the pollinating aspect, all kinds of little bugs are going there from flower to another, pollinating fruit trees. Yes, please.
I think every tree is like one ecosystem.
Yes, and us individually are ecosystem. We have a bacteria in our guts.
Yeah.
We ourselves are universe in a kind of on its own. But again, we are part of the group. We are part of the bigger picture. We are dependent for our needs from nature. And as long as we recognize this, that we are part of natural system rather than purely urban environment, that is kind of dependent on a trading and a commercial aspect of living, better we are going to be in terms of understanding and making the choices of everyday life, or maybe developing that sort of broad aspect of living and understanding what's happening as a reality. Okay, so let's come back to the tree. Can you see that? I mean, I'm going to read it one by one, but just in case, obviously, if anything comes to your mind, you know, raise your hand. Perfect. We are going to talk a little bit about that, yeah? So, here we go. Leaves, yeah, when they fall down, and like over there, okay, and they rot there, they are building the soil. So that part is like about composting and mulching. The tree roots are going deep down because the tree is mining for nutrition, for minerals. Also the tree is bringing those minerals up from the deep soil and transforming it up to the trunk and ending up with the fruit, you know. And by eating the fruit we are getting all the nourishment and all the minerals that are needed for our everyday life. Obviously I'm talking organic and a natural sort of fruit. Again, apart from tree, there are other beings involved. There is that little rabbit, is eating the grass around, but obviously it's fertilizing the soil as well by releasing the excess or by excrement, because in nature there is no waste. Whenever you look in nature, everything is used for something else. From one system goes to another. What is waste for one system, it becomes food for another system. That includes sort of manure, and you probably heard, I mean everybody heard that mulching by sort of natural manure, you know, from animal is actually good because it's full of trace elements and energy that is needed for microorganisms that actually essential part of the system. Birds, they help pest control. Also, they are capable of fertilizing and spreading the seeds. If there is one cherry tree planted here, and the local birds obviously would spread that seed in a probably 10 miles radius. And we would find little cherry trees blossoming here and there, and over the couple of years the landscape would change in terms of there would be new variety of I mean there would be more cherries around, and so we want to sort of recognize that there is that bigger picture. Is there any question on this? Kind of all good, okay. Permaculture is working with nature and not against the nature. What's happening in today's terms, we find that industrial agriculture is trying very hard to control environment. They want that yield for granted. No matter what, they want that end produce because it's commercial. So that becomes very rigid sort of science, and in industrial agriculture the big machinery is forced across the land. Also there is a use of artificial fertilizer, and which is in fact damaging to environment. It gives the results on the short run, but then farmers are finding that after 10 years of using artificial fertilizer, the productivity, the yield is going less and less and less. And then that kind of soil that's been heavily sort of treated with fertilizers, it had to be sort of recovered. Permaculture is dealing with recovering of the soil and recovering of soil that has been affected by human behavior and industrial food production. Okay. Putting massive effort into attempting to tame nature, such by damming valleys and food plains, or creating and maintaining bare soil by plow, is not only energy consuming, unsuitable and destructive, it is also unnecessary when we can meet the needs of the people and the environment by working in harmony with nature, or even directly utilize natural systems. Instead of using massive chemical inputs to control pests, why not encourage predators such as ladybirds to do our work for us? Or why not construct homes that use passive solar energy and wind power rather than building nuclear power station? So talking about that sustainability is not only about recovering the soil, that is major aspect, but it's also applicable to other aspects of living and human needs, as like renewable energy, as well as providing the shelter for people and solving problems on a wider scale, that we can build a house in a sustainable way. If you look in that house there, it's probably built a couple of 100 years ago, but that stone, there was some energy put into that, sort of lifting that stone and putting it in place. But once it's there, it stays there for a long time, and it becomes shelter for many years. And even if you look in the village, it becomes shelter for many generations. This is the sort of way of looking into sustainable building, that even the little effort now is going to sort of pay back on the long run. So let's move a little bit forward on that one. We also want to see solutions, not the problems. There is a genuine saying that problem is solution within permaculture circles. It's maybe a little bit confusing how the problem could be solution. But then looking and spending time observing is very important. Permaculture is about 100 hours of thinking and 1 hour of work, because we would like to understand what's happening before we actually get involved. What we are finding is that people generally tend to think that, oh yes, we know. And next thing that they're moving machinery, digging, moving, and doing all kinds of work, only to find out later on that there is sort of impact and damage to the ecosystem and the natural environment. So it's good slowing down a little bit, opening sort of for new possibilities, and also talking within the group. Yes, please.
Sorry, I have something to say.
Yes.
I did heard lots of natural source of energies.
Yes.
Like magnetism,
Yes.
solar, and
Yes.
so stuff. But I think in our world,
Yes.
too many geopolitics
Yes.
and these stuffs don't give like me, people like us,
Yes.
to do something about it.
Right. Since the beginning of the century, all of you heard about Nikola Tesla, for example. He was a great inventor, the one who actually brought solutions, alternative solutions to the energy crisis, wireless transfer of energy. Unfortunately, all kinds of alternative knowledge has been suppressed. We find that it's not commercial. The big companies cannot control our little windmill running around, generating 24 volts voltage electricity, filling up our bank battery banks, let's say our accumulators. They are commercially not controlling it, and obviously the media is influenced. In the same time, we find more and more people getting more educated about alternatives way of generating energy, and it's as part of it is obviously new technology that we can all search for information on internet, YouTube. So all kinds of solutions are presented there. In the same time, this is the time now when individual effort is so important, because those little achievements, building little motor, building little solution that is practical and usable, could be published, and that knowledge could be spread on a wider scale. We also finding communities, like recently within our little NGO Blagodat Serbia, we experimented with the hydrogen gas, and only once we generated gas, we done a little video about it, and we generated a high heat of 2,800 degrees. We start melting aluminium and iron, and it's the energy made from water by electrolytic process. And only once we done it, we found that we have a local community in Serbia that is actually building all this sort of experience, and that there are people who are actually contributing to that and building their own machines, hydrogen machines. So, yes, please.
I have seen in Germany one guy drive his own car with water.
Yes, exactly. It's a very big topic. In the same time, there's so many different solutions within the sort of energy, but the energy solutions are part of the bigger picture that includes that permaculture is dealing with. Let me go back to the solutions. See solutions, not the problems. Problem is solution. For example, Bill Mollison said once, somebody was complaining to him that there is too many slugs, and you know what the slugs are. It's like a snails without the sort of it's very difficult to deal with in a garden. They would eat all vegetables, and they would hide up and in the middle of the night come out, and also when it's wet, and they could devastate the garden. What Bill Mollison said is, you don't have excess of slugs, you have a duck deficiency. You have a less ducks, because permaculture is dealing with the whole system, so there is that chain of food chain. So if you have lots of slugs, obviously you now need the duck to be integrated as a part of the system. They're not eating vegetables, they're eating slugs. They fit perfectly. They would feed. We don't have to buy the food, for the duck, if part of their everyday meal would be the sort of snail, So not only that they solve our problem in the garden with sort of protecting our vegetables, the ducks would actually feed itself and giving us that sort of and then ducks are feeding ourselves as well, because as the output we have eggs, for example. There is also great saying, never kill the goose. If you kill the golden goose, what's going to happen? There's no more eggs.
No golden eggs.
Yes, keep the golden goose alive and find the balance, get the sort of eggs, So instead of running into problems, it's good to actually do design and see what the situation is. And even when we do mistake, that mistake is done on a paper, so it's not costly. If we see eventually within the sort of permaculture design that there is potential mistake, also that design is open to community, so people could sort of put different aspects, look into it. Two heads thinks better than one. The group is, the whole is bigger than one. It's like a creative thinking, also sort of brainstorming part of it. It's about group work. So we find that that the problem could be solution. I also had a little issue, when I experienced that problem is solution in my own garden in London, where I was actually implementing design in a little garden that is at the back of my house. It used to be the grass area, low mown, where I used to sort of take off my shoes and sort of walk around and try to stretch in the morning, and I love that feeling, walking barefoot on the grass. And that was, at that time, in that point in time, that was the great experience. I didn't know for any better. Okay, eventually I realized that the grass just getting cut and is getting wasted, and the soil get poorer and poorer and poorer, because all these energies get wasted, you get actually ending on a landfill, getting in the green sacks, and the council didn't have a recycling process in place, talking 10 years ago. And I had a couple of wood logs, maybe 5 or 6 of them placed next to each other, and to me it was only visual, I wanted to just see those wood logs, like being there, giving me a little idea about nature, reminding me of nature in the middle of the city. When we moved later on into design, I realized that part of my garden had a heavy shading bit. And I was thinking, I'll have a shade, how am I going to grow anything when there is a shade? On the other side, where it was the sunny part, I had the wood logs. I didn't know what to do. Eventually, by allowing time, allowing for observation, I realized that by moving those wood logs in the shade bits, I can grow mushroom in the wood logs. And they love shade. They love that wet sort of environment, you know. And just by simple transfer of wood logs into the shady bits, the problem, which was shade, becomes solution, because now all of a sudden we recognize that in the shady bit we can grow something that is, you know, beneficial. At this point in time, when I look my neighbor garden and when we look in my garden, the difference is obvious. I hope any of you, you know, I mean, could get in touch, you know, not only sharing pictures and all this. If you happen to be in London, you're very welcome, you know, give me a call, send email, you know, I can sort of see you and bring you around, introduce you to permaculture community, and just to give you sort of little aspect how even urban communities, London is addressing issues. Talking about that, permaculture is dealing with the urban environments as well. We've seen people who genuinely have problems of sustaining in the cities because they are purely related to the commercial aspect of living and the shops and so on, that turn around that problem into solutions. So people are actually collecting food from local restaurants that have been wasted and they feed their animals, or collecting sort of leaves from the trees that are collected in a park and they take it to the land. So using all this energy in a productive sense, transforming problems into solutions. So, yes, please.
I have a few questions I'd like to ask.
Yes, please.
Earlier you mentioned about permaculture. Permaculture has to do with us being in harmony with nature.
Yes.
So I'd like you to expound a bit. What exactly you mean by harmony? Because that, to me, my interpretation is that it's a perfect balance.
Yes.
And to my understanding, I don't think you can ever achieve a perfect balance once human element works in correlation with nature.
Okay, you are spot on. You are absolutely right.
And my wait, please. Okay. And my second question would be,
can I answer your question? Second question after first question. Okay. At least because we want to keep it simple. Yes, in the nature there is a perfect balance. Permaculture is approaching the natural environment in a full respect, observation and learning from natural process. Also permaculture is recovering the land that is already damaged. It's, as I said, never kill the goose. Allow for the natural process to happen. Minimize impact. In the same time, skimming off the top. So if you walk in nature and you find a fruit tree, little plum or, you know, berries and all, yes, you're allowed to eat it, you know, but don't, you know, take a chemical and spread around and say, yes, we are going to have a more yield and we are going to do something unnatural in a natural environment. But the key point is awareness of the whole community about exactly what you said. So I'm 100% with you. Next question.
My second question had to do with what's the difference between permaculture and the already established sustainable environmental practices that we have. But you just said that is to minimize impact. And that's what I was going to get to when I asked you in correlation with the first question.
Okay, I have a question and the question for your question. What do you consider to be a sustainable system in place that we already have? What do you think in particular? I mean,
I don't know. Let's say for water.
Yes.
We're trying to reduce water pollution per se. I don't know.
I understand. Yes, there are sustainable solutions in place, but again, we find that people who are academics and specialize and experts in the field are very narrow-minded in their own field, not because they don't want to do anything else, but just because educational systems sort of train them in a way, for example, just to do water treatment, for example. So yes, there is a water treatment sustainable system in place. Nevertheless, permaculture is dealing with the whole picture. So it includes the water and energy and housing and growing
Understand.
food.
However, I think that no particular person can be specialized in all of those fields. There's subdivided fields in environmental practices.
Yes.
So I think that some people have to have certain specialization in certain
Yes,
fields.
yes, absolutely spot on. The nature is such a huge. Science doesn't understand what's happening in a 1 teaspoon of soil. Within that, yeah, there is so much life. There is billions and billions of microorganisms. Now science explains that sort of transformation of energy and breaking biomass and everything that's happening in chemistry, biochemistry. But they cannot sort of say exactly what's happening in that single microorganism. What is the origin of life? And we find again that reality is that the life is actually spreading and is thriving and is multiplying and is getting richer and richer and richer. So in the same time, permaculture is about getting communities together, that we share this knowledge, that we share this awareness. So obviously people who specialize in water treatments have that say. People who are specializing in food, let's say wood, agroforestry, they have their place. People who are specializing or know local knowledge, villagers knowing local knowledge how to raise their animals in a natural way, like this guy who was walking a couple of cows all the way down the road, you know. Yes, why not, you know. I would love to actually spend more time with the guy, remain to be seen, you know, walking with him and the cows and going to his home and seeing how he collect what's needed, you know, because they do it in a sustainable way. They would cut the grass, they would store it for winter time in order to minimize sort of expenditure on buying. They're not buying artificial food. So a couple of days ago we had homemade cheese and the milk that came directly from the goat, you know, and it was still lukewarm, you know. I forgot last time when I had the greatest pleasure drinking that milk. It was like next to mother's milk to me, you know. So yes, we want to learn that, but once we learn it, we want to share it in order that we all get a little bit more. And nobody's there to dominate the nature, neither to dominate the ecology. In fact, it's very difficult to be dogmatic in the nature, because exactly for that reason, because nobody knows everything. So people who come across all knowledgeable either have to sort of show it in the real terms on the real farm by their work. We have some great guys like Sepp Holzer. It's a guy who lives on 1,500 meters height in Alps, and he made a 40 hectares farm on the land that was massively damaged by erosion. Among the pine trees that have a very shallow sort of root, there was great ecological disaster. And Sepp Holder, since 60s, he started recovering the soil by implementing certain system of terracing and retaining water, soaking that water in a deeper level, and also planting all kinds of varieties of trees and edible shrubs.